Sarah Mitchell had always been the smallest person in any room she entered. At 23 years old, she stood barely 5 feet tall with a slender frame that made her look even younger than her actual age. When she joined the military reserves, many people questioned whether she belonged there at all. Her drill sergeant often looked at her with doubt in his eyes, and her fellow recruits whispered behind her back about how she would never make it through basic training. The military base was a harsh environment where only the strongest seemed to survive. Sarah found herself constantly struggling to keep up with the physical demands of training. While other recruits effortlessly completed obstacle courses and carried heavy equipment, Sarah had to work twice as hard to achieve the same results. Her breathing would become labored during long runs, and her arms would shake when holding rifles for extended periods during target practice. Lieutenant Davis, one of the training officers, made no effort to hide his disappointment with Sarah's performance. During morning inspections, he would shake his head when he reached her bunk and mutter comments about how some people were not cut out for military service. The other recruits began to see her as a liability, someone who would slow down their entire unit during missions. Despite the constant criticism, Sarah refused to give up. She woke up earlier than everyone else to practice drills in private. While others slept, she would run extra laps around the base, pushing her small body to its limits. Her hands became calloused from gripping equipment and her muscles ached constantly, but she never complained or asked for special treatment. The breaking point came during a team exercise where recruits had to carry wounded soldiers to safety. Sarah was paired with Marcus, a tall and muscular recruit who had quickly become one of the favorites among the training staff. When it was Sarah's turn to carry Marcus, she struggled under his weight, stumbling several times before finally collapsing. The entire training ground fell silent as Marcus got up, brushing dirt off his uniform with visible annoyance. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Lieutenant Davis announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear. In a real combat situation, weakness like this gets people killed. Some individuals are simply dead weight that the rest of the team has to carry. His words cut through Sarah like a knife, and she could feel the judgmental stares of her fellow recruits burning into her skin. That evening, Sarah sat alone in the mess hall picking at her food while conversations flowed around her. She overheard several recruits discussing the day's events, with some suggesting that she should consider leaving the program voluntarily before she was forced out. Marcus was particularly vocal, telling anyone who would listen that having Sarah on their team was a safety risk that could endanger everyone's lives. The base commander, Colonel Harrison, was known for his strict standards and no-nonsense approach to military training. He had served in multiple combat zones and had little patience for recruits who could not meet the demanding requirements of military service. When reports reached him about Sarah's poor performance, he made a mental note to keep a close eye on her progress during the remaining weeks of training. Sarah's bunkmate, Jenny, was one of the few people who showed her any kindness. Late at night, when the barracks were quiet, Jenny would whisper words of encouragement and remind Sarah that everyone had different strengths. However, even Jenny sometimes wondered if Sarah was fighting a losing battle against opponents who were simply bigger and stronger than she would ever be. The psychological pressure began to wear heavily on Sarah's mind. She started questioning whether she had made a terrible mistake by joining the military in the first place. Her family had been supportive of her decision, but she wondered what they would think if they knew how badly she was struggling. The thought of returning home as a failure filled her with dread, but staying seemed equally impossible. During weapons training, Sarah's small hands made it difficult for her to handle some of the larger firearms effectively. Her shooting accuracy was inconsistent, and she often needed help adjusting equipment that was designed for larger soldiers. The armory sergeant frequently expressed frustration with having to make special accommodations for her, adding to the growing sentiment that she did not belong in the military environment. One particularly difficult day involved a long-distance march with full combat gear. Sarah fell behind the group multiple times, forcing the entire unit to wait for her to catch up. By the time they reached their destination, she was exhausted and dehydrated, barely able to stand upright. Lieutenant Davis used this as another opportunity to lecture the group about the importance of physical fitness and team cohesion in military operations. The other recruits began to treat Sarah with a mixture of pity and resentment. Some felt sorry for her obvious struggles, while others were angry that her limitations affected the entire group's performance ratings. The social isolation became almost as challenging as the physical demands of training, leaving Sarah feeling completely alone in a place where teamwork was supposed to be everything. As weeks passed, Sarah's determination began to waver. She had given everything she had to prove herself worthy, but it seemed like nothing she did was ever good enough. The constant criticism and lack of support from both instructors and fellow recruits created an environment where failure seemed inevitable. She started to believe that maybe everyone was right about her being dead weight. The final weeks of basic training loomed ahead like an insurmountable mountain. Sarah knew that the most challenging tests were still to come, including survival exercises and combat simulations that would push every recruit to their absolute limits. She wondered if she would have the strength to continue fighting against the overwhelming odds stacked against her, or if it was finally time to accept that some dreams were simply too big for someone of her size and capabilities. The morning of the survival exercise arrived with gray clouds hanging low over the training grounds. Sarah had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with anxiety about what lay ahead. The exercise was designed to test every skill they had learned during basic training, combining physical endurance, tactical thinking, and teamwork under extreme pressure. For Sarah, it felt like her final chance to prove she belonged in the military. Colonel Harrison stood before the assembled recruits, his weathered face stern as he explained the rules of the exercise. Each team would be dropped in a remote section of the forest with minimal supplies and would need to complete a series of objectives while avoiding capture by opposing forces. The exercise would last 3 days and 2 nights, testing their ability to survive in harsh conditions while maintaining military discipline and effectiveness. Sarah found herself assigned to Team Charlie, led by Marcus, who had consistently been one of the top performers throughout training. The team also included Jenny, her supportive bunkmate, along with 3 other recruits who had proven themselves capable during previous exercises. When Marcus learned about Sarah's assignment to his team, his face darkened with obvious displeasure, but he said nothing in front of the commanding officers. As the transport vehicles carried them toward the drop zone, the tension within Team Charlie was palpable. Marcus huddled with the other team members discussing strategy, while deliberately excluding Sarah from their planning session. She sat quietly in the corner, checking and rechecking her equipment, knowing that any mistake on her part would be amplified and remembered by everyone. The helicopter landed in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. As the recruits jumped out with their heavy packs, Sarah stumbled slightly upon landing, drawing disapproving looks from several team members. Marcus immediately took charge, assigning roles and responsibilities to each person. Sarah was given the task of carrying communications equipment, which was considered one of the less critical assignments. Their first objective was to locate a hidden supply cache marked on their map, approximately 10 miles through difficult terrain. The forest was thick with undergrowth, fallen trees, and steep ravines that made navigation challenging even for experienced hikers. Sarah struggled to keep pace with the group, her smaller stride requiring more steps to cover the same distance as her teammates. By midday, the team had made good progress despite the challenging conditions. However, Sarah's legs were already aching and she was breathing heavily from the constant effort required to maintain the group's pace. Marcus called for a brief rest, during which he pulled the other team members aside for a whispered conversation. Sarah pretended not to notice their glances in her direction, but she could sense their growing frustration with her performance. When they resumed their march, the terrain became even more demanding. They encountered a steep hillside covered in loose rocks and thick vegetation that required careful climbing techniques. Sarah's smaller size actually proved advantageous here, as she was able to find handholds and footing that larger team members missed. For the first time since the exercise began, she was not holding the group back. However, her moment of success was short-lived. During the descent on the other side of the hill, Sarah lost her footing on wet leaves and slid several feet down the slope before catching herself on a tree branch. The communications equipment in her pack was damaged in the fall, with the radio antenna bent and the main unit showing signs of internal damage. Marcus's anger was immediate and intense. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Marcus said through gritted teeth as he examined the broken equipment. "Now we have no way to communicate with base command or other teams. Your clumsiness just put our entire mission at risk." The other team members gathered around, their expressions ranging from disappointment to outright hostility. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes but fought to keep them from falling. Jenny tried to defend Sarah, pointing out that anyone could have slipped on the treacherous terrain, but Marcus was not interested in excuses. He made the decision to continue the mission without proper communications, hoping they could find alternative equipment at one of the objective points. The atmosphere within the team became even more strained as they pressed forward through the forest. As evening approached, they located the supply cache hidden beneath a camouflaged tarp near a small stream. Inside, they found additional food rations, medical supplies, and replacement equipment that would help them complete their remaining objectives. However, there was no replacement radio, meaning they would have to continue operating without communication. Capabilities for the remainder of the exercise. The team made camp for the night in a defensive position overlooking a valley where they suspected enemy forces might be operating. Marcus assigned watch duties to each team member, giving Sarah the middle of the night shift when visibility would be poorest and threats most difficult to detect. It was another subtle way of expressing his lack of confidence in her abilities. During her watch, Sarah sat in the darkness listening to every sound in the forest around them. Owl calls echoed through the trees, and small animals rustled through the underbrush, creating a symphony of natural noises that could easily mask the approach of human threats. She found herself questioning every shadow and movement, wondering if her inexperience would cause her to miss important warning signs. Around 2 in the morning, Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. It was the sound of voices speaking in hushed tones, coming from the direction of the valley below their position. She strained to listen more carefully, trying to determine how many people were out there and whether they posed a threat to her sleeping teammates. The voices seemed to be getting closer, moving steadily up the hillside toward their camp. Sarah faced a difficult decision. Should she wake Marcus immediately and risk being wrong about the threat, potentially exposing their position unnecessarily? Or should she wait to gather more information and risk allowing enemy forces to get too close to their defensive position? Her hands trembled as she gripped her rifle, knowing that whatever choice she made would have serious consequences for the entire team. The approaching voices became more distinct, and Sarah could now make out at least 3 different speakers moving through the forest with practiced stealth. They were definitely heading toward the team's camping location, and their careful movement patterns suggested they were trained military personnel rather than fellow recruits from other teams. Sarah realized this was likely the opposing force that Colonel Harrison had mentioned during the mission briefing. With her heart pounding in her chest, Sarah made the decision to wake Marcus as quietly as possible. She crawled over to where he was sleeping and gently shook his shoulder, placing her hand over his mouth to prevent him from speaking aloud. When his eyes opened, she pointed toward the valley and held up 3 fingers to indicate the number of approaching threats. Marcus's expression immediately shifted from annoyance to serious concern as he realized the gravity of the situation. Marcus quickly alerted the rest of the team using hand signals, and within minutes all 6 recruits were awake and positioned defensively around their camp. The approaching voices had grown closer, and now they could hear the crunch of footsteps on dry leaves and the occasional snap of twigs underfoot. Sarah's early warning had given them precious time to prepare for what appeared to be an imminent confrontation with opposing forces. The enemy patrol consisted of 3 experienced sergeants from the base, dressed in camouflage and equipped with night vision goggles and blank ammunition for training purposes. Their mission was to locate and capture recruit teams during the exercise, testing the students' ability to avoid detection and respond to hostile contact. Most recruit teams were caught off guard during these encounters, but Team Charlie now had a significant advantage thanks to Sarah's vigilant watch. Marcus positioned his team members strategically among the rocks and trees surrounding their campsite. Despite his previous criticism of Sarah, he recognized that her alert had potentially saved them from capture, and he assigned her a crucial position covering the most likely approach route. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she aimed her rifle toward the sounds below, knowing that her performance in the next few minutes could change everything. The opposing force moved with professional precision, using standard military tactics to sweep the area where they suspected the recruit team might be hiding. However, their night vision equipment created a false sense of security, making them slightly less cautious than they might have been in complete darkness. Sarah watched through her rifle scope as the lead sergeant emerged from behind a large tree, moving directly into her line of sight. When the engagement began, It erupted with sudden intensity. Marcus gave the signal to open fire, and the hillside erupted with the sound of blank rounds and tactical movements. The opposing force immediately took cover and began returning fire, turning the training exercise into a realistic combat simulation that tested every skill the recruits had learned during their weeks of preparation. Sarah found herself in the middle of her first simulated firefight, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she aimed and fired at the opposing forces. Her smaller size allowed her to use cover more effectively than her larger teammates, and she was able to move between positions without being detected. For the first time since joining the military, her physical limitations were actually working to her advantage. The battle lasted nearly 20 minutes, with both sides maneuvering for better positions while maintaining suppressing fire. Sarah managed to eliminate one of the opposing sergeants with accurate shooting, marking him with paint rounds that indicated a successful hit. Her teammates began to notice her effective performance, and even Marcus seemed surprised by her tactical awareness and shooting accuracy under pressure. However, the opposing force was too experienced and well-equipped for the recruit team to defeat completely. Eventually, 2 of Sarah's teammates were marked as casualties, and Marcus made the tactical decision to retreat rather than risk total capture. The team gathered their essential equipment and melted back into the forest, using darkness and terrain to avoid the pursuing enemy forces. As they moved through the night, Sarah proved herself capable of keeping pace with the group, despite the challenging conditions. Her earlier struggles seemed to have taught her how to manage her energy more effectively, and she was no longer the weak link holding back the team's movement. The successful engagement had boosted her confidence, and she began to move with more assurance through the difficult terrain. Dawn broke as they reached their next objective point, a mock communications tower that needed to be destroyed using training explosives. The mission required careful planning and coordination, as other teams might also be attempting to complete the same objective. Marcus had to make strategic decisions about timing and approach while dealing with a reduced team size due to their earlier casualties. Sarah volunteered for a reconnaissance mission to scout the area around the communications tower. Her small size and improved confidence made her an ideal candidate for the dangerous task of gathering intelligence without being detected. Marcus hesitated before agreeing, still harboring doubts about her capabilities despite her improved performance during the night engagement. Moving alone through the forest, Sarah felt a mixture of fear and excitement as she approached the target area. She had never operated independently during a military exercise, and the responsibility of gathering critical intelligence for her team weighed heavily on her shoulders. Every sound seemed amplified in the morning stillness, and she forced herself to move slowly and deliberately to avoid detection. The communications tower was situated in a small clearing surrounded by dense vegetation that provided excellent concealment for approaching forces. Sarah discovered that 2 other recruit teams had already arrived and were positioned around the perimeter, apparently planning their own assault on the objective. This intelligence would be crucial for Marcus to develop an effective strategy for their own mission. As Sarah prepared to return to her team with the reconnaissance information, she spotted movement in the tree line opposite her position. A 4th group was approaching the area, but their uniforms and equipment indicated they were not recruits. These appeared to be more opposing force personnel, likely planning to defend the communications tower against all attacking teams simultaneously. The situation had become significantly more complex than anyone had anticipated. Multiple recruit teams and opposing forces were now converging on the same objective, creating a chaotic battlefield that would test every aspect of military training and leadership. Sarah realized that her reconnaissance mission had uncovered intelligence that could give her team a decisive advantage if they acted quickly and wisely. Racing back through the forest, Sarah pushed herself harder than ever before, knowing that time was critical for her team's success. Her legs burned with effort, and her lungs strained for oxygen, but she maintained her pace through sheer determination. The thought of letting down her teammates after finally proving herself useful drove her forward despite the physical discomfort. When she reached the team's position, Sarah quickly briefed Marcus on everything she had observed during her reconnaissance mission. Her detailed report included the positions of other teams, the strength and equipment of the opposing forces, and potential approach routes that might allow them to complete their objective while avoiding unnecessary confrontation with superior numbers. Marcus listened intently to Sarah's intelligence briefing, asking detailed questions about enemy positions and capabilities. For the first time since the exercise began, he was treating her as a valuable team member rather than a liability. The other recruits also gathered around to hear her report, recognizing that her successful reconnaissance mission had provided them with information that could mean the difference between success and failure. Based on Sarah's intelligence, Marcus developed a plan that would allow them to approach the communications tower from an unexpected direction, while other teams engaged the opposing forces. It was a risky strategy that required precise timing and coordination, but it offered their best chance of completing the objective successfully, despite being outnumbered and outgunned by their opposition. The assault on the communications tower began at precisely noon, when Marcus determined that the positioning of enemy forces and competing recruit teams created the optimal window for their approach. Sarah's reconnaissance had revealed a narrow ravine that provided concealed access to the tower's eastern side, avoiding the main defensive positions where opposing forces expected attacks to originate. Team Charlie moved through the ravine with practiced stealth, using hand signals and carefully coordinated movements to avoid detection. Sarah found herself positioned near the front of the formation, her smaller profile making her less visible to potential observers. The confidence she had gained from her successful intelligence-gathering mission showed in her improved tactical movement and awareness of her surroundings. As they approached the target area, the sounds of combat erupted from multiple directions around the communications tower. Other recruit teams had begun their assaults simultaneously, creating exactly the kind of chaos and distraction that Marcus had hoped to exploit. The opposing forces were forced to divide their attention among several threats, reducing their ability to focus on any single approach. Route. Sarah was assigned the critical task of placing the training explosives at the base of the communications tower, while her teammates provided covering fire and security. It was a responsibility that would have been unthinkable just days earlier, when she was considered the weakest member of the team. Now Marcus trusted her with the mission's primary objective. Recognizing her proven ability to perform under pressure, the final approach to the tower required crossing 30 yards of open ground under potential enemy observation. Sarah waited for Marcus's signal, her heart pounding as she prepared to sprint across the exposed area with the training explosives secured in her backpack. The weight of the equipment no longer seemed overwhelming, and she felt ready to complete the mission that could determine her future in the military. When Marcus gave the signal, Sarah burst from cover and ran toward the communications tower with speed and determination that surprised even herself. Enemy fire erupted around her position, with paint rounds marking the ground where she had been moments before. Her teammates provided suppressing fire that kept the opposing forces from achieving accurate targeting as she covered the dangerous open ground. Reaching the base of the tower, Sarah quickly began setting up the training explosives according to the procedures they had practiced repeatedly during basic training. Her hands moved efficiently despite the stress of the situation, and she found herself thinking clearly about each step of the process rather than being overwhelmed by the chaos happening around her. As she worked to arm the training device, Sarah noticed movement in her peripheral vision that made her blood run cold. An opposing force sergeant was approaching her position from a blind angle that her teammates could not cover with their current firing positions. He was moving carefully but steadily, clearly intending to capture her before she could complete the demolition mission. Without hesitation, Sarah abandoned the training explosives and drew her sidearm, engaging the approaching sergeant in close-quarters combat simulation. The encounter was brief but intense, with both participants using the hand-to-hand combat techniques they had learned during training. Sarah's smaller size initially appeared to be a disadvantage, but her agility and determination allowed her to outmaneuver her larger opponent. The sergeant was experienced and skilled, but he had underestimated Sarah's capabilities based on her appearance and reputation. She managed to mark him with paint rounds from her sidearm, officially eliminating him from the exercise. With the immediate threat neutralized, she quickly returned to the training explosives and completed the arming sequence just as additional enemy forces began converging on her position. The successful detonation of the training device marked the completion of Team Charlie's primary objective, earning them valuable points in the overall exercise evaluation. Sarah's teammates erupted in celebration as the tower's demolition was officially confirmed by exercise observers. For the first time since joining the military, Sarah felt like she had truly contributed to a successful mission, rather than being carried by stronger team members. However, their celebration was short-lived as enemy forces began closing in on their position from multiple directions. Marcus quickly organized a fighting withdrawal, with each team member covering specific sectors while they retreated toward their extraction point. Sarah found herself assigned to rear guard duty, a position that required her to delay, pursuing enemies while her teammates moved to safety. The retreat through the forest became a running battle that tested every skill Sarah had developed during her military training. She moved from cover to cover, using accurate rifle fire to slow down pursuing forces while maintaining communication with her teammates through hand signals and brief radio transmissions. Her performance during this phase of the mission was nothing short of exceptional. As they approached the extraction point, Sarah noticed that Jenny had been wounded during the fighting withdrawal. Although it was only a training injury marked by paint rounds, the simulation required treating her as a genuine casualty who needed assistance to reach safety. Without being asked, Sarah immediately moved to help Jenny, supporting her weight while continuing to watch for enemy threats. The final phase of the extraction required crossing a river that was too deep and swift for Jenny to navigate safely in her simulated wounded condition. Sarah made the decision to carry Jenny across the water, despite the obvious physical challenges involved. Her teammates watched in amazement as she struggled through the current, refusing to abandon her wounded comrade despite the personal risk and difficulty. Marcus and the other team members provided covering fire from the opposite bank as Sarah fought her way across the river with Jenny on her back. The current was stronger than expected, and several times it seemed like both recruits might be swept downstream. However, Sarah's determination and newfound strength allowed her to reach the far bank safely, delivering her wounded teammate to the extraction point. The 3-day exercise concluded with Team Charlie's successful completion of all primary objectives and the safe extraction of all team members, including their simulated casualty. Exercise observers noted their exceptional performance under pressure and their ability to adapt to changing tactical situations. Most importantly, they had functioned as a cohesive team unit despite the earlier doubts about one member's capabilities. As they waited for transport back to the base, Sarah sat quietly among her teammates, still processing everything that had happened during the challenging exercise. The physical and mental demands had pushed her beyond limits she never knew she possessed, and she had proven to herself and others that determination could overcome apparent disadvantages. Marcus approached Sarah privately while they waited for the helicopters, his expression serious but no longer hostile. He acknowledged that his initial assessment of her capabilities had been wrong, and he apologized for treating her poorly during the early phases of training. Her performance during the exercise had earned his respect and demonstrated that military effectiveness came in many different forms. The helicopter ride back to base was filled with animated discussions about the various challenges and successes of the exercise. Sarah participated in these conversations as an equal member of the team, sharing her perspectives on tactical decisions and lessons learned. The transformation from outcast to valued team member was complete, though she remained modest about her contributions. Upon returning to base, word of Team Charlie's exceptional performance quickly spread among the training staff and other recruit units. Sarah's role in their success became widely known, fundamentally changing how people viewed her capabilities and potential as a military service member. The recruit who had once been considered dead weight was now seen as someone who had proven herself under the most demanding circumstances possible. The weeks following the survival exercise brought a dramatic change in atmosphere around the military base. Sarah found herself treated with newfound respect by instructors and fellow recruits who had previously dismissed her capabilities. Lieutenant Davis, who had been among her harshest critics, began acknowledging her presence during morning formations and even offered occasional words of encouragement during training sessions. However, Sarah remained focused on continuous improvement, rather than dwelling on her recent success. She understood that one exceptional performance did not guarantee future achievements, and she continued to wake early for additional training sessions. Her dedication became even more intense, driven by a desire to prove that her exercise performance was not simply a fortunate accident, but rather a reflection of her true potential. The final phase of basic training included advanced tactical exercises, weapons qualification tests, and leadership evaluations that would determine each recruit's suitability for specialized military roles. Sarah approached these challenges with confidence she had never possessed before, knowing that she had already proven herself capable of performing under extreme pressure when it mattered most. During weapons qualification, Sarah's improved marksmanship skills earned her scores that placed her among the top performers in her training class. Her small hands, which had initially been seen as a disadvantage, allowed her to maintain steady aim for extended periods. The same instructors who had once doubted her ability to handle military weapons now praised her shooting accuracy and technical proficiency. Leadership exercises presented Sarah with opportunities to command other recruits during simulated missions. Her teammates, who had witnessed her transformation during the survival exercise, responded positively to her leadership style. She demonstrated that effective military leadership could come from understanding each team member's strengths rather than relying solely on physical intimidation or loudness. Marcus, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters, often volunteered to serve under her command during training exercises. Their relationship had evolved from antagonistic to mutually respectful, with both recruits learning valuable lessons about making assumptions based on appearances. Marcus's endorsement carried significant weight among their peers, further enhancing Sarah's reputation. The final week of basic training culminated in a comprehensive graduation exercise that tested every skill recruits had developed during their months of preparation. Teams were randomly assigned to ensure that interpersonal relationships did not influence performance evaluations. Sarah found herself leading a group of recruits she had not worked with extensively, creating an opportunity to demonstrate her leadership abilities with unfamiliar team members. Her assigned team included several recruits who had struggled with different aspects of training, creating challenges similar to what she had faced earlier in the program. Sarah drew upon her own experiences of overcoming adversity to motivate and encourage team members who were dealing with self-doubt and criticism from others. Her empathetic leadership style proved highly effective in building team cohesion. The graduation exercise scenario involved a complex urban warfare simulation in a mock city constructed on the base training grounds. Teams had to clear buildings, rescue hostages, and neutralize enemy threats while minimizing collateral damage and civilian casualties. The exercise tested tactical thinking, leadership skills, and the ability to make critical decisions under pressure. Sarah's team was assigned one of the most challenging objectives, requiring them to rescue simulated hostages from a fortified building, while enemy forces controlled multiple approach routes. The mission demanded creative tactical planning and flawless execution, as any mistakes could result in hostage casualties or team member eliminations that would significantly impact their evaluation scores. Using lessons learned from her reconnaissance mission during the survival exercise, Sarah personally conducted a detailed surveillance of the target building to identify enemy positions and potential approach routes. She discovered a drainage system that could provide concealed access to the building's basement level, offering an unexpected avenue for their assault, while avoiding heavily defended main entrances. The assault plan that Sarah developed relied on coordinated, diversionary attacks to draw enemy attention away from her team's actual infiltration route. She assigned roles based on each team member's demonstrated strengths, ensuring that everyone could contribute meaningfully to the mission's success. Her planning process included multiple contingency options to address potential complications during execution. When the exercise began, Sarah's team moved with precision and confidence through the urban environment. Her leadership during the mission was calm and decisive, providing clear instructions while adapting to changing tactical situations. The drainage system infiltration succeeded perfectly, allowing them to reach the hostage location without alerting enemy forces to their presence. The hostage rescue phase required delicate handling to avoid simulated civilian casualties while neutralizing enemy guards. Sarah coordinated her team's movements through hand signals and whispered commands, maintaining the element of surprise until the moment they initiated their assault. The operation concluded successfully with all hostages rescued and no team casualties. Exercise observers noted Sarah's exceptional leadership performance and innovative tactical planning in their official evaluation reports. Her ability to maximize her team's capabilities while overcoming challenging operational constraints demonstrated advanced military thinking that exceeded expectations for basic training graduates. The same recruit who had once been considered inadequate was now being praised for outstanding potential. Following the graduation exercise, Colonel Harrison conducted individual performance reviews with each recruit to discuss their training results and potential military career paths. When Sarah entered his office, she found herself face to face with the commanding officer whose approval she had desperately sought throughout the entire training program. Colonel Harrison's demeanor during the meeting was significantly different from their previous encounters. He reviewed Sarah's performance records, noting her dramatic improvement and exceptional results during the final phases of training. Her transformation from struggling recruit to outstanding performer had not gone unnoticed by the senior staff, and her dedication had earned their genuine respect. The colonel informed Sarah that her performance had qualified her for advanced training opportunities that were reserved for the most promising recruits. Several specialized military units had expressed interest in her unique combination of tactical thinking, leadership potential, and proven ability to perform under extreme pressure. Her small physical stature was no longer seen as a limitation, but rather as an asset for certain specialized roles. During their conversation, Colonel Harrison acknowledged that initial assessments of recruit potential were not always accurate, and that determination and character often proved more valuable than pure physical capabilities. Sarah's journey through basic training had become an example for instructors about the importance of giving every recruit the opportunity to prove themselves rather than making premature judgments. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment that went far beyond simple relief at having completed basic training successfully. She had not only proven herself worthy of military service, but had also discovered inner strength and capabilities she never knew she possessed. The transformation from despised outcast to respected leader represented a complete reversal of her circumstances through sheer determination and perseverance. The formal graduation ceremony was scheduled for the following week, when families and friends would gather to witness the recruits' transition from civilians to fully trained military personnel. Sarah looked forward to the ceremony with pride and excitement, knowing that she had earned her place among the graduates through one of the most challenging personal journeys any recruit had ever undertaken during basic training. The graduation ceremony was held on a crisp autumn morning when golden sunlight streamed across the parade grounds, illuminating rows of perfectly aligned recruits in their dress uniforms. Sarah stood among her fellow graduates, her posture straight and confident, bearing little resemblance to the uncertain young woman who had arrived at the base months earlier. The transformation was visible not only in her physical bearing, but also in the quiet assurance that radiated from her presence. Families and friends filled the bleacher stands surrounding the parade grounds, creating a sea of proud faces and emotional expressions. Sarah's parents had driven hundreds of miles to attend the ceremony, their excitement evident despite their initial concerns about their daughter's decision to join the military. They had received regular updates about her progress, but seeing her among the graduating recruits filled them with overwhelming pride. Colonel Harrison took his position at the podium to address the assembled crowd, his voice carrying clearly across the parade grounds through the amplification system. He spoke about the challenges that each recruit had faced during their training and the dedication required to successfully complete the demanding program. His words emphasized the transformation that military service created in young people, preparing them for lives of service and leadership. As the ceremony progressed through its formal elements, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The memories of those early days when she had been considered the weakest member of her training class seemed almost surreal now. Every obstacle she had overcome and every moment of doubt she had conquered had contributed to the person she had become. Lieutenant Davis, who had initially been among her harshest critics, approached the microphone to present special recognition awards to outstanding graduates. Sarah was surprised to hear her name called as the recipient of the Leadership Excellence Award, an honor given to the recruit who had demonstrated the most significant growth in leadership capabilities during training. The applause from her fellow graduates was genuine and enthusiastic. Walking across the stage to receive her award, Sarah maintained her military bearing while internally marveling at the complete reversal of her circumstances. Lieutenant Davis shook her hand firmly while presenting the medal, and she could see genuine respect in his eyes rather than the disappointment that had characterized their earlier interactions. His words of congratulation were sincere, acknowledging her remarkable transformation and exceptional leadership potential. The ceremony continued with individual graduate recognition, and Sarah was amazed to hear several of her fellow recruits specifically mentioned for achievements during team exercises, where she had served as their leader. Marcus received recognition for tactical excellence, and during his brief acceptance speech, he publicly credited Sarah's leadership and strategic planning for much of his team's success during the final graduation exercise. When Colonel Harrison returned to the podium for the ceremony's conclusion, his demeanor became more serious and formal. He announced that he had a special presentation to make, one that was not part of the standard graduation program. The audience fell silent as he explained that exceptional circumstances sometimes required recognition beyond the normal award structure. The colonel began recounting the story of a recruit who had overcome extraordinary challenges to not only complete basic training but to emerge as one of the most promising military leaders in the graduating class. Although he did not initially mention names, everyone present began to realize that he was describing Sarah's remarkable journey from struggling recruit to outstanding graduate colonel. Harrison detailed the survival exercise where this recruit had demonstrated exceptional courage, tactical awareness, and leadership under extreme pressure. He described how her early warning had saved her team from capture, how her reconnaissance mission had provided critical intelligence, and how her determination during the final extraction had ensured no team member was left behind. The audience listened in rapt attention to this account of extraordinary military performance. As the colonel's narrative continued, he emphasized the lessons that could be learned from this recruit's experience about the danger of making premature judgments based on appearances or initial performance. He spoke about the importance of perseverance, dedication, and the willingness to continue fighting even when others had given up hope. His words resonated deeply with everyone present, from family members to training staff. The moment that would be remembered by everyone present came when Colonel Harrison called Sarah forward to receive a commendation that had never before been awarded to a basic training graduate. The Distinguished Leadership Medal was typically reserved for experienced officers who had demonstrated exceptional command capabilities in combat situations. Sarah would be the first recruit in the base's history to receive this prestigious recognition. As Sarah walked across the stage for the second time, the audience rose in a spontaneous standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Her fellow graduates applauded enthusiastically, recognizing that her achievement reflected well on their entire training class. The instructors and training staff who had witnessed her transformation joined in the applause, many of them visibly moved by the emotional significance of the moment. Colonel Harrison's presentation speech became deeply personal as he described his own initial doubts about Sarah's suitability for military service and his gradual recognition of her exceptional qualities. He admitted that her journey had taught him valuable lessons about leadership, perseverance, and the importance of giving every person the opportunity to prove their worth. His words carried special weight coming from a decorated combat veteran with decades of military experience. The medal presentation itself was conducted with full military ceremony, with Sarah maintaining perfect bearing, while the colonel placed the distinguished decoration around her neck. The significance of the moment was not lost on anyone present, as they witnessed a young woman who had been dismissed as dead weight, receiving the highest honor available to graduating recruits. Following the medal presentation, Colonel Harrison made an announcement that surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. He revealed that her exceptional performance had attracted attention from military leadership at the highest levels, and she had been selected for direct entry into an elite special operations training program, typically reserved for experienced soldiers with proven combat records. The opportunity represented an extraordinary career advancement that would have been unimaginable just months earlier when Sarah was struggling to complete basic physical training requirements. The Special Operations Program would challenge her in new ways, but her proven ability to overcome adversity and excel under pressure made her an ideal candidate for the demanding specialization. As the formal ceremony concluded and families began reuniting with their newly graduated soldiers, Sarah found herself surrounded by well-wishers and congratulations from people who had witnessed her remarkable transformation. Her parents embraced her with tears of joy and pride, hardly believing that their daughter had achieved such extraordinary recognition during her military training. Marcus and Jenny, along with other members of her training class, gathered around Sarah to share their excitement about her success and express their gratitude for her leadership during their shared experiences. The bonds formed during their challenging training would last throughout their military careers, and Sarah's example would continue to inspire others facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Lieutenant Davis approached Sarah privately after the crowd had dispersed, offering his personal apology for his initial treatment of her, and expressing his admiration for her determination and character. He acknowledged that her success had changed his approach to evaluating recruit potential, and he promised to remember the lessons learned from her example in future training programs. That the day that had begun with Sarah standing among a group of graduates concluded with her recognition as the most outstanding recruit in her training class and her selection for elite military service. The transformation from despised outcast to distinguished leader was complete, representing one of the most remarkable success stories in the base's training history. 6 months after graduation, Sarah stood in the briefing room of the Special Operations Training Center, surrounded by some of the military's most elite soldiers. The advanced training program had pushed her beyond every limit she thought she possessed, but the foundation of determination and resilience, built during basic training, had carried her through challenges that eliminated many candidates with more traditional military backgrounds. The Special Operations instructors had initially been skeptical about accepting a recruit directly from basic training, regardless of her exceptional performance records. However, Sarah's consistent demonstration of tactical intelligence, leadership capability, and unbreakable determination had quickly won their respect. Her ability to think creatively under pressure proved invaluable in scenarios where conventional approaches failed. During one particularly challenging training exercise, Sarah's team had been tasked with infiltrating a heavily defended compound to retrieve sensitive intelligence. When their primary and secondary approach routes were compromised, Sarah developed an improvised solution that utilized drainage systems and service tunnels to reach their objective. Her innovative thinking had saved the mission and demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility that special operations demanded. The physical demands of special operations training were more intense than anything Sarah had experienced during basic training, but her body had adapted and strengthened through months of progressive conditioning. More importantly, her mental resilience had been forged in the crucible of overcoming seemingly impossible odds, giving her an unshakable confidence in her ability to persevere through any challenge. Major Stevens, the commanding officer of the Special Operations Training Program, had become one of Sarah's strongest advocates within the military hierarchy. He recognized that her unique combination of tactical intelligence, leadership skills, and proven ability to perform under extreme pressure made her an ideal candidate for the most demanding military assignments. Her success in the program was already being studied as a model for identifying and developing unconventional military talent. News of Sarah's extraordinary journey had spread throughout the military community, inspiring countless other soldiers who faced their own challenges and doubts. Her story had become legendary among training bases, where instructors used her example to encourage struggling recruits and remind them that determination could overcome almost any obstacle. Letters from young soldiers seeking advice and encouragement arrived regularly at her training facility. The transformation of Sarah's reputation extended far beyond her immediate military circle. Military leadership magazines featured articles about her remarkable rise from struggling recruit to special operations candidate, highlighting the lessons her experience provided about talent identification and development. Her story challenged traditional assumptions about military capability and demonstrated the importance of providing opportunities for everyone to prove their potential. Colonel Harrison, who had overseen her basic training graduation, received regular updates about Sarah's continued success in advanced military programs. He often reflected on the lessons her journey had taught him about leadership and the danger of making premature judgments about people's capabilities. Her example had fundamentally changed his approach to recruit evaluation and training philosophy. During a recent visit to her former basic training base, Sarah had been invited to speak to current recruits about overcoming adversity and achieving their military goals. Standing before a group of young soldiers facing their own challenges, she shared the story of her transformation from despised outcast to distinguished graduate. Her words carried special weight because everyone knew she had walked the same difficult path they were traveling. The impact of her presentation was immediately visible in the faces of recruits who had been struggling with self-doubt and criticism from others. Several soldiers approached her afterward to express their gratitude for sharing her experience and to seek advice about persevering through their own difficulties. Sarah's story provided them with hope that current struggles did not determine future potential. Marcus, who had graduated and been assigned to a different military unit, maintained regular contact with Sarah through emails and occasional visits. Their relationship had evolved into a deep friendship, built on mutual respect and shared experiences during their transformative basic training period. He often credited his own military success to lessons learned from observing Sarah's determination and resilience. Jenny had also excelled in her military career, and she frequently spoke about the inspiration she had drawn from watching Sarah overcome seemingly impossible challenges. The three friends had formed a bond that would last throughout their military service, supporting each other through various assignments and continuing to learn from their shared experiences during those crucial months of basic training. The Special Operations graduation ceremony was scheduled for the following month, and Sarah was expected to be among the top performers in her training class. The same young woman who had once been considered too weak and small for basic military service was now preparing to join the most elite units in the armed forces. Her journey represented one of the most remarkable transformations in military training history. Lieutenant Davis, who had initially been among her harshest critics, had requested permission to attend Sarah's Special Operations graduation ceremony. He wanted to personally witness the culmination of the extraordinary journey he had observed from its most difficult beginnings. His presence would serve as a powerful reminder of how completely circumstances could change. Through determination and perseverance, the military community continued to study Sarah's experience for insights into talent, development, and leadership identification. Her story had become a case study in military academies and leadership training programs, demonstrating that exceptional performance could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when individuals were given appropriate support and opportunities to prove themselves. As Sarah prepared for her final Special Operations training exercises, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her from the brink of military failure to the threshold of joining elite military units. Every challenge she had overcome had contributed to her development as both a soldier and a leader, creating capabilities she never could have imagined possessing. The young woman who had once been dismissed as dead weight was now recognized as one of the military's most promising future leaders. Her story served as a powerful reminder that true potential often lay hidden beneath surface appearances, waiting for the right circumstances and opportunities to reveal itself. Sarah's transformation had not only changed her own life, but had also influenced countless others who heard her remarkable story. Standing before her reflection in the barracks mirror, Sarah saw a confident and capable soldier who bore little resemblance to the uncertain recruit who had arrived at basic training months earlier. The journey had been more difficult than anything she could have imagined, but it had also revealed strengths and capabilities that would serve her throughout her military career and beyond. Her story was far from over, but the foundation had been laid for a lifetime of extraordinary achievement and service.